It's a new series, but same results for both the Dallas Stars and the Toronto Maple Leafs. Lose game one at home. The road teams continue to dominate so far this postseason. Let's get right to it.
You're Locked On Fantasy Hockey, your daily podcast on fantasy hockey. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back to the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast. I am your host, Steele Roden, graduate of the College of Sports Media in downtown Toronto, a part of the Locked On Podcast Network for about 14 months now. Absolutely loving it. And hopefully you love the content as well every single day, Monday through Friday, your podcast every single day. Game one of the second round has begun. Toronto Maple Leafs taking on the Florida Panthers. Sergei Bobrovsky comes up in the clutch, stands tall, and secures the win on the road for the Florida Panthers. Joe Pavelski returns to the lineup for the Dallas Stars, and he returns in incredible fashion, scoring all 4 goals. Just hopped on here as the Seattle Kraken won. Yanni Gourde, the goal scorer in overtime. So the Kraken also up 1-0 on the road in the second round in game one against the Dallas Stars. But what a return for Joe Pavelski. We're going to get to all of that. And of course, big time bets at the end of the episode. But this episode is brought to you by Gametime. Gametime, download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. You don't want to miss out. You'll get all the flash deals on last minute tickets for your events. It's a fantastic app. I really suggest everyone download the Gametime app right now and get your tickets for the playoffs if they're available. But game one of round 2, Florida Panthers on the road in Toronto against the Maple Leafs. And to me, just an amazing game start to finish. Intensity right from puck drop. And the great thing was the Maple Leafs actually showed up in the first period for once. I want to say all 6 games against the Tampa Bay Lightning, they were maybe game 2 where they scored 3 in the first, but even then they were just absolutely terrible to start every single game, it seemed like. So it was great to see them actually come out with some jump in their step right off the bat, getting a couple of scoring chances. Very fast pace right from the get-go, physical, long sequences back and forth. There weren't a ton of whistles in this game either. That's why it was so awesome to watch. You just love fast-paced, physical hockey where the whistles just aren't getting in the way. There weren't a ton of penalties in this game, which was great for both teams. But I got to say, I love what I've seen from the additions at the NHL trade deadline for the Toronto Maple Leafs. Jake McCabe, Luke Schenn, Nola Chari, all 3 guys, 17 hits combined. Jake McCabe and Luke Schenn were just all over Matthew Tkachuk with the open ice hits, and I love to see it, even though Tkachuk was still dominating in the offensive zone. But yeah, Panthers come up with a 4-2 win in game 1. It happened again in round 1 where the Leafs lost game 1 against the Tampa Bay Lightning. So it's nothing to be concerned about. They've been in this situation before. It wasn't a blowout, so it wasn't as embarrassing. But the Panthers get the first win in this series. They're up 1-0. But that's not to say that the Maple Leafs didn't have their chances. They had a ton of high danger chances. And even though how great Tkachuk, Barkov, Verhaeghe, Bennett, they were all amazing in this game, the crown goes to Sergei Bobrovsky. He was absolutely sensational. 34 saves, a .944 save percentage. It's absolutely crazy how a guy can play so bad in the regular season, lose his starting job to Spencer Knight, loses his starting job to Alex Lyon, and then gets put into this situation, dominates the Boston Bruins, and stands tall in game 1 against the Toronto Maple Leafs. Terrible fantasy player in the regular season. In the playoffs, he's been unreal so far. But again, he was the superstar for the Panthers this game in game 1 against the Toronto Maple Leafs. But even though Matthew Tkachuk, 3 assists, Barkov, 2 assists, Montour, Verhaeghe, Bennett all getting on the board. Verhaeghe with the game-winning goal. I was explaining and telling you guys in last episode how quick and precise and accurate that wrist shot is from Carter Verhaeghe. again, the Leafs had their chances. They had amazing power plays. Usually I'm very, very disgusted and thrown off by their power play entries and zone setups, trying to get something to go. But this, even though they didn't score on the power play, I believe they were 0 for 3 or 0 for 4. Even though they didn't score on the power play, they had great zone entries. The setup was right away. They were zipping the puck around from player to player. Morgan Riley up at the top, quarterbacking the power play. They had a ton of chances, but Sergei Bobrovsky came up with some huge saves, a couple of big blocks from their penalty kill as well. And it just came down to the Maple Leafs couldn't bury on their chances. They had a ton of high danger scoring chances, but just couldn't put the couldn't put the puck in the back of the net. But that's what happens. Game one goes to the Florida Panthers. There are a few highlights, though, for some young guys. Matthew Knies gets his first goal ever in the NHL, first goal in the playoffs. He has 4 points in 6 games now in the postseason. You know, he's still a young player. He's 20 years old. This is a guy that you want to keep your eyes on, by the way, for next year's fantasy draft. And I want to talk about another one from the Florida Panthers. But Matthew Knies gets his first goal, and it's the way he bounces back right away. You know, kind of loses control in the defensive zone, didn't get to the puck right away where it was his man, and he didn't get in the shot lane, puts his stick out, it deflects off his stick, goes off Bennett and in the back of the net for the second goal of the game. But it's the bounce back. It's that mentality of shrugging it off, exactly what he did at the faceoff circle, shrugging it off and just focusing on the next play. It's always the next play, and he does that right away. 9 seconds later, Matthews carries the puck into the zone, sets up Matthew Knies, and he makes an incredible move, spinorama, empty netter, and he scores his first of the postseason, first NHL goal. So Matthew Knies at 20 years old, he will definitely remain in the Leafs lineup moving forward, even for next year. Not sure where he'll be placed, maybe a third line, bottom six position. Maybe he continues to play with Matthews and Marner on that top line, but he will be in the lineup, and he is a guy that I will be keeping an eye on and looking towards drafting in the later stages of next year's fantasy draft. And Eetu Luostarinen of the Florida Panthers, 5 points in 8 games himself as well. And a 24-year-old that, again, is sort of solidifying himself more and more every single time he steps on the ice, producing well offensively. He's great in the defensive zone on faceoffs. So a guy like Luostarinen and Matthew Knies, 2 young guys on 2 up-and-coming teams. Well, I know Leafs are already there, but Panthers kind of rebuilding around Matthew Tkachuk now, barely squeaks into playoffs. But again, they've got some great guys up and down their lineup, and both Matthew Knies and Eetu Luostarinen are guys to keep an eye on for next year's fantasy draft. We are going to move forward. Up next on the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast is Game 1 from the Dallas Stars and the Seattle Kraken series. We will get to big time bets at the end of the episode, but this episode is brought to you by Gametime. Have you ever really wanted to go to a game or a big event, but couldn't find any last minute tickets at a great price? Buying tickets doesn't have to be stressful. It shouldn't be stressful going to your favorite events, and Gametime is the fastest and easiest way to buy your tickets for all the sports, music, comedy, and theater shows near you. They have killer deals on last minute tickets and best prices guaranteed, so you can stop stressing over the tickets and start getting hyped for all the fun you're about to have. I'm going to be using Gametime all summer long for Vancouver Whitecap tickets. Amazing deals. So close to Gametime. The Gametime app has incredible flash deal prices on last minute tickets and even images of the views from your seat before you purchase. It's amazing for spontaneous adventures. Forget all the planning in advance. The Gametime app has deals on tickets right up to the day of the event, so get exclusive flash deals. It's the fastest growing ticketing app in the country for a reason. So snag the tickets right now with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. Gametime, an incredible and very useful app for all of those last minute deals and flash deals for your events. And again, thank you so much for making the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast your first listen every single day. Make sure you're tuning in to Armando Velez of Locked On Panthers Florida and Mike DiStefano and Dave Morisuti from Locked On Maple Leafs. They continue to carry and break down this second round playoff series against those two teams. We are all a part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every single day. And your team, if you're the Seattle Kraken, you are living it up right now. If you're the Dallas Stars, you're grateful for Joe Pavelski. He's back in the lineup. He dominates an incredible performance in game one. But nonetheless, Dallas Stars come empty-handed at home once again in game one. What an unbelievable start to the game. 6 goals scored in the first period. I thought Jake Ottinger was for sure going to get pulled after that 4th goal from Jordan Eberle. But again, talking about Matthew Nye's response after his mistake, the Seattle Kraken have had great responses all year long. Go down 2-1 after the, in the middle of the first period. And what a response from the Seattle Kraken. 3 straight goals in 55 seconds to take a 4-2 lead in the first period. They gave up that 2-goal lead. It ended up heading into overtime, but they did pull off the win from Yanni Gourde halfway through the first overtime. But that's the resiliency and resilientness of the Seattle Kraken team. They just are on you. They dog you all game long. And that is going to be a big problem for the Dallas Stars moving forward. This is a dangerous series for the Dallas Stars because if you look back to that first round series against the Minnesota Wild, the Dallas Stars had the luxury of facing the 3rd most penalized team in the regular season. The Minnesota Wild were awful all series long, all year long for taking very dumb and inexcusable penalties at the wrong time. And that's what Minnesota got caught with a lot of the times in that first round series against the Dallas Stars. I do want to say, of course, they were missing Joel Eriksson Ek, a couple of guys throughout that series. Don't want to put the blame on that, but the penalty kill was atrocious for the Minnesota Wild. So the Dallas Stars had that luxury in the first round going up against the 3rd most penalized team, but they don't have that in this series against the Seattle Kraken. In the regular season, the Kraken were in the bottom half of most penalized teams. So the Dallas Stars don't have that benefit anymore in this series. They're actually currently the 2nd least penalized team so far this postseason. And that's going to be a problem for the Dallas Stars because their power play has been so good. They execute right off the bat, win faceoff draws, set up their power play, and put pucks on net. And that's what domination it was in the first round series against the Minnesota Wild. But the Kraken aren't going to be taking penalties, and they wear you down. They wore the Colorado Avalanche down in the first round. They're one of the hardest and most physical teams in the NHL right now. And I know it's only their 2nd year, but it is true. It is a fact. The Kraken are one of the hardest and most physical teams to play against. 3rd most hits so far this postseason as well. 2nd most in blocks. And again, that just goes to show the ability of the Seattle Kraken to continuously wear down their opponents game in and game out. I look at the stats from yesterday's game between the Seattle Kraken and the Dallas Stars. And even though it went to overtime, it was 4-4 by the end of the 3rd period. They were outworked all game long. 47 hits compared to 19 for the Dallas Stars. 21 block shots for the Stars compared to 20 for the Seattle Kraken. So it evened out towards the end of this game. But even shots on goal, they're one of the top teams in the postseason right now, putting pucks on net. 44 shots on goal compared to 35 from the Dallas Stars. So every aspect for the Seattle Kraken is just working. They don't have that superstar player. Their top goal scorer, Jared McCann, is still out with injury. Matty Beniers is still trying to get that. One of the lowest scoring teams in the postseason, actually. But they were able to do so because they were able to wear down their opponents. Physical, fast, always on you, always forechecking. Their defensive guys or the defensive group has been lights out all series long. Philip Grubauer gave some soft goals, I believe, in that first game against the Dallas Stars, but he's still been incredible so far. And he's been lights out too. He had an 886 save percentage, 31 saves on 35 shots. But Pavelski, one of the best hand-eye coordination players in the game right now. That 4th goal was absolutely filthy. Puck was probably just below the crossbar. It was close to being a high stick. And somehow got the middle shaft of his stick up in the air, deflects it top corner. He's just sensational and so lucky for the Dallas Stars to get him back in the lineup. after a scary hit like that from Matt Dumba. It was scary. Did never want to see a player go down to injury and not return, especially for that extended period of time. So it's great for the Dallas Stars to get him back in the lineup, but they lose game one at home to the Seattle Kraken. I actually might want to switch my pick here. I think I might want to go with the Seattle Kraken in 7. It's going to be a tough series. Again, the power play is not going to benefit them as much as it did in the first round. They're not going to get that many chances on special teams, and the Kraken just wear you down physically, mentally, all the time, putting pucks on net. And it's going to be an incredible series. Great start to round 2 of the NHL postseason. We are going to get to big time bets very, very soon. But thank you so much for making the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast your first listen every single day. Don't forget, we are free and available on your favorite podcast platform, including YouTube. So make sure you hit the subscribe, hit the follow button. We appreciate all the love, all the support you show us every single day. And make sure you're tuning in for every single day of the rest of the playoffs. So much hot content coming out, games in, games out, player grades moving forward for fantasy players next season. We're going to have all of that coming up on the podcast. But big time bets, where the money is made. Game 1 for the Carolina Hurricanes and New Jersey Devils, May 3rd, as well as the Vegas Golden Knights and Edmonton Oilers. I'm actually going back to a flip triple dip here. Haven't done a bet in a while, but I'm feeling this Carolina Hurricanes, New Jersey Devils game. First pick of the night, Hurricanes and Devils under 5.5. I don't care whether it's Frederik Andersen or Antti Raanta in net. Akira Schmid has been lights out so far since stepping in for Vitek Vanacek. I think this is going to be a low-scoring game. We know Carolina is so stingy in the defensive zone, and if you look at the records in the postseason for the Hurricanes as well as the Devils, it was obviously under 6.5 for a lot of those games. I'm going with the under 5.5 to juice up those odds a little bit, put it in a little parlay. But the flip triple dip continues. Hurricanes on the money line against the New Jersey Devils. Rarely, I want to say maybe 1% of the time, 2% of the time, the Hurricanes lose at home. I just don't think it happens in game 1 against the Devils. Hurricanes on the money line is my second pick, and my lock of the night, Sebastian Aho, anytime assist. He has been scoring goals, but I think he's going to be a playmaker in game 1, set up his teammates, and get the boys going for the Hurricanes in game 1. Those are the 3 picks. Pencil them in, lock them in, and put your money where your mouth is. Hopefully, I'm helping all of you guys out there with your fantasy draft picks for next season, helping you out with your big time bets. And thank you so much for making the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast your first listen every single day. Again, make sure you're tuning in Monday through Friday, 7 o'clock in the morning Eastern time is when the episodes are published. So you don't want to miss out. Listen to it on the way to work in the morning. And again, thank you so much for tuning in for today's podcast. Have a great day. Good luck with all your bets out there, and we shall see you back here again tomorrow.